Okay, so this is video 6, and video 6 just kind of carrying on from before video 5 left off. And again, we're still kind of focusing on the introductory chapter. Video 6 this topic is about the next topic, if you will, that you want to introduce in the introductory chapter, and it's the topic of testing, um, and or measurement or testing, however you want to describe it. Now, the introductory chapter, again, will only go into this subject briefly, and your main topic, or down in the body of your thesis, should go into more detail about this. I think it's very important to introduce this, at least at this point in time in the introduction, to state that right now at this point in your introduction, you've introduced the thesis, which is essentially saying that the impacts of social media on college students may indeed be quite significant. In fact, perhaps even profoundly so, which is kind of how you've introduced it. But there's quite a bit of difficulty in actually obtaining hard data that would support that, certainly in terms of some of these impacts. And again, I think that you at least need to introduce that there's going to be a significant section down below that really talks about this, and I think actually almost needs to agonize over the fact that how difficult this is. Again, you've got a lot of data that you can draw from in terms of some of the research you've done already. But I think there's going to be a real key point that I think you can make, which is no matter how much data you can collect, uh, I think it's quite difficult to say the difference between subjects A and subjects B on whatever you're testing, cognitive abilities or memory or psychological factors or whatever, to try to pin down that the difference that you're seeing is completely related to the use or non-use of social media. I think it's quite a leap. If you remember when we were dealing with the statistics class, there's a whole concept of hidden variables. Like you collect data and you think that A and B are separate only by the thing you're testing, the test variable, like in this case the use or non-use of social media, and you measure something and the values are quite different, and you say, aha, they're quite different, so therefore social media causes this difference. I think that that's quite a leap to make, because I think it's hard to isolate this effect, or the effect of this. I mean, an example might be someone that uses social media a lot, let's say, might be because they have a fancy iPhone or something like that, which is maybe different for a different set of students that don't have the money to have a fancy phone like this or something like that. So it could be what you're actually measuring here is financial status of the student. Someone who has more money does worse in school. I don't know, something along those lines. The point is that your analysis can definitely be clouded by other factors. Not only that, it's just hard. It's hard to actually even test some of these things we're testing. How do you test a student's cognitive abilities, or even like ability to store and recall from their memory in an effective way? These are not easy things to measure at all. And again, you discovered a lot of this as you did your own testing. A lot of this has to be kind of self-assessment survey style, like you did. But if you remember back in the stats class, that's tough. I mean, you run the risk of people not really answering properly. Again, you even noticed this in your test, that I think you kind of drew a conclusion that perhaps even the folks that filled out the survey weren't totally honest with their replies, which again is normal. So it's I think there's a number of things to talk about in terms of why or how it's, or say why it's difficult to get good measurements, get hard measurements. Uh, and again, I'm not saying that the introductory section should have all this, but this is kind of the basic concept. And the next step from that concept is, but I'm going to try this anyway. And even though it's so difficult, I'm going to conduct a survey, and I'm going to write a questionnaire in as neutral way as possible, to try to eliminate as much bias as possible, to get a random sampling and all that kind of stuff that you talked about in your thesis already, that again you learned from the stats class. You're still going to go ahead and do all that, collect the data, and again, I think that the section in your thesis is really good in this area, where it's it's kind of almost mechanical description of here's what I did and here's the kind of data I collected and all that kind of stuff, all the way down into the results. And the results is the next thing that to mention briefly in the introduction is that measuring is difficult, but I did a test anyway. I collected some data and I got some results. I'm able to draw some conclusions from these results, but they are perhaps inconclusive as well because of the self-assessment bias and etc. Um, and then finally you're into I think then a clause where you need to actually make some subjective judgments and that kind of maybe go that are compatible with your hard results, but then kind of get into the subjective areas about some of your opinions. For example, this is where you basically say, you get the sense that this technology is not only distracting, but it has some addictive qualities to it, and it's unlike other technologies that were distractive, like video games or chat rooms or something like that. This one is particularly uh, obsessive or whatever word you want to use, in encompassing of the student's you know psyche, such that it has a profound impact. And I think you're free to actually add in opinions. You need to kind of back them up with observation, like you did in your thesis. You bet you had some statements where it's like I've observed in my class, I've observed students that done this and that sort of thing. I think you can back up some opinions with observation. But I think you can also make some opinions just kind of based upon just an assessment of incomplete information, which a lot of times you have to do in these areas. So that I believe is the end. And again, at the end of your thesis paper, I think that's the right place to conclude is kind of the opinions on that. Now again, you may have some stuff down at the bottom too, but I had also been alluding to the fact that you have a closing chapter or section in your thesis after the opinion section to really close it down. And that can be as few as a sentence or two, just so that you don't just kind of end on something meaty. But it could also be used as a way for you to, I don't know, make some projections, or here's what I think will happen, or here are the things to look for. Whatever you want to close with. Again, some of those things could argue or could be in the opinion piece as well. So anyway, I guess all I'm saying about the closing paragraph is that it could be an extension of your opinion section, or it could just be a closing little paragraph to close out your thesis. Okay, that's it on video 6.